oh, yeah, yeah, I did. I do think they're yeah, I do think they're real. I think I think that happened to me or something. It kind of all kind of came back and that little tiny moment, which, again, it's not really much to talk about, but it just there was a feeling of like, okay, that all makes sense. Yeah. And like nobody had ever said to me like, fairies could be real or, I think my brain was like, I will turn this off because it's not, I don't know what it is. Like I can't say anything about it. Like I couldn't even I wouldn't have the words or like anything, right? Um, until I was like in my early 20s and somebody sort of like all they had to do was say like fairies are real. And then I was just like, and then it all kind of sort of like flooded in. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Now that thing that happened kind of makes more sense.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
Whatever it is, it looks every bit like a fairy and very little like anything else.
But seriously, it kind of looks like a fairy. Just kind of doesn't look like your standard moth.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
But I wasn't going to make this video until I looked a little bit closer and I realized after it lands behind my bench, it disappears. And it just vanishes. And in fact, I went outside to look, to try to find it, to see if it was trash, to see if it was a bug, to see if it was a leaf, like trying to figure out what it could be, and it was gone. It just vanished.
What's that? Yeah. What's what? Yeah, look. Right up there. Insect or something.
Is that an insect? Let's have a look. What is it?
I don't know. Oh my god!
Oh.
What happens to people who cut down fairy thorns?
Did you see it? Huh? Did you see it?
Yeah, me and him saw it.
What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious. Did you see anything land in your backyard?
But the paranormal is real. Is it? But the paranormal is real.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight we're going, nowhere. Actually, I'm going nowhere in the sense that we're staying here in British Columbia, Canada on Vancouver Island. But for the rest of the listeners that aren't me, we're taking you to British Columbia, Canada for a conversation with Leaf. Leaf, how you doing tonight?
I'm excited.
Really appreciate you being here. And what I'm going to do real quick here, Leaf, is just give you kind of a brief intro before we get into talking about some of your fairy content and stuff that you got to talk about. So for the audience listening, I'm really excited to talk with Leaf tonight. Leaf has got a early childhood fae experience that she'll be sharing with us, which is really cool. But also, Leaf has been kind enough to share with me during our pre-conversation that she's got a really interesting background both in the creation of fairy art, which, as we've all been learning on the show, the power of the fae as muse is pretty much limitless, it would appear. And also, Leaf's got some interesting insights born of a spiritual journey through, through to and including Fae, I'll let her tell it in her own words, but looking at the Fae more as a serious topic and ultimately ending in a decision to adopt Buddhism. And for everyone listening, I've talked a little bit about my veganism. Never really talked about my religious perspectives, but I'm also a Buddhist. So I'm interested, just to bring that up and talk to another Buddhist, because that's cool. But before we get all there and get to all that interesting stuff that we're going to talk about, I'm just going to give you a quick set of bumpers on this bowling alley here, if I could please, Leaf. On Fascinating Fae, we don't try to convince anybody of anything. So, especially when you're talking about your early childhood encounter, no worries if the details are limited. No worries if it's a long time ago, right? So no worries about anything at all that you can't really recall. Because, we're just here to collect amazing stories and add them to the pile, if you would. I'll also say that, I personally, when I tell my story about seeing a fairy, can sound pretty incredible, pretty hard to believe, pretty hard to contextualize. And so I do really think it is brave for people to come forward. And I sincerely appreciate that you're willing to talk to everyone here about this, myself and the audience included. So with all that said, and thanks for allowing me to sort of, gently ease you into things here. What I'd like to ask you to do, just to begin with, is if you could, for myself and for the audience, if you would be so kind, just kind of go back to this early childhood memory. Start as early into the memory or contextual parts of the memory as you need. Like, where were you? How old were you? That kind of stuff tends to be valuable. So if you could just start there and then walk us into that early childhood encounter, I'm really excited to hear about it, please.
So I would say, okay, so I have to explain a little bit about, before I start telling the story, I just want to explain a little bit about where I grew up. I grew up in southern Ontario, and I was in this, kind of a small town, and it was the 80s. And I lived in this one house from the age of 0 to 8. And in this house in particular, although I did not have firsthand experiences of the paranormal, ghosty types, my family members did. So this house, and there was a few other houses on the block who had similar instances, like because neighbors would talk and this type of thing. I know that in my family, generally speaking, my family isn't overly, into weird high strangeness or anything like that. Like, if anything, they're not like that at all, actually. But my older siblings had some experiences that were happening in the house, and they kept telling my parents about them. And my dad was a very, he's from Europe, and he was just very kind of a stoic type and didn't really acknowledge the issues that were happening in the house. And he kind of brushed it off, and he kept saying, no, 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 don't be silly, these are my older siblings, and they goof around and stuff like that. So people, they weren't taking them super seriously until my dad had his own experience. And shortly after that, we had a priest come in to, bless the home. And I do remember the priest there. Like, of course, I didn't have the experiences myself, but I remember the priest coming in, and he was he was using holy water and putting little crosses on the tops of the door frames. And it's an interesting memory to have as a child. Like, why is there a priest in the house, like trying to bless the house? So after that, I mean, this is what I was told later on as an adult. I was told after that things actually calmed down and the house wasn't as maybe like active, I guess. Um, I could tell you a little bit about what my dad experienced. Um, sure. This is what I know only through what my mom has told me, and yeah, my dad passed away in 2019, so he never, again, he never talked about these types of things. So, but yeah, he had, I guess, told my mom that basically he went to bed one night and, everybody's sleeping, it's dark, it, goes to sleep. And I remember the layout of the house pretty well. And so where he would be sleeping, he could look through the door, if the door was open, the bedroom door, and he can look down the hallway. And at the end of the hallway were the stairs. So this is a little bit, I'm getting shivers right now. So he was looking down the hallway and he saw on the stairs two figures of a uh, described as like people in old-timey, old-fashioned clothing. And so after that, again, I was a child, so like I wasn't really told about any of these things as a kid or anything. But he's after that, that's when we had the priest come in, and like I said, I remember the priest coming in and this type of thing. So yeah, that was the house I grew up in, and it was like a honestly a very magical childhood because it was a very tiny house. It wasn't like big, it wasn't like a, you know, I don't know what you, a mansion or anything like this. It was like a regular sized home, and we weren't, super wealthy or anything, but I feel like I had everything that a child could want. We had a willow tree in the backyard. We had a pool. We had a garden. And then this was back in the 80s, so there were lots of like empty lots still. So like, now there's all houses and supermarkets and whatever, right? But back when I was a kid, like I had empty lots, like empty, pretty much like meadows, just like meadows to go and run and play in. So like it was a really like wonderful, magical childhood in that way. And then my experience there, there's a couple things that happened there. One, I had a lot of nightmares there, but again, I wasn't being told about any of the issues with the house, but these were just nightmares that I was having, like just on my own as a kid, without knowing about the ghosts or anything. And then my like fairy experience is not that there's not much to like elaborate on or talk about too much with it, but all that happened was that I was probably around 5 or so, and I was like asleep in my room. I woke up and I distinctly remember it was like, I think it was dawn, like where the sun was like just coming up. Like there was still, like it was just that strange time, like between, like it's dark, but there's some light. It was like kind of orange, like the lighting in the bedroom. And yeah, I woke up and I saw a sparkle, which is kind of funny to say, but like a kind of a sparkle at the end of my bed, like to the right of the bed, maybe about, I don't know, like 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And it was like a little sparkle. It wasn't like big. It wasn't um, in the shape of anything. It wasn't like an orb or anything like that. It was like a little light, I guess, and sparkly light. And I was 5. As far as I understand, I just went back to sleep. Didn't think much of it. I don't think I even told my parents about it or anything. Um, it was just something that happened that I remember. And it wasn't until I'm 42 now, and it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, and I was hanging out with my friend. We were on a ferry boat, and he was just this really great guy who's like, we were friends in college, and we were kind of artsy fartsy whatever. And he said something along the lines of like, I don't know, he was talking about a fairy book or something, and just like nonchalantly he said something like, fairies are real, right? And like it was really interesting because up until that time I had not thought about that experience, but as soon as he said that I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, I do think they're real. I think i think i think that happened to me or something. It kind of all kind of came back, and that little tiny moment, which, again, it's not really much to talk about, but it just, there was a feeling of like, okay, that all makes sense. Yeah. And like nobody had ever said to me like, fairies could be real, or, I think my brain was like, I will turn this off because it's not, I don't know what it is. Like I can't say anything about it. Like I couldn't even I wouldn't have the words or like anything, right? Um until I was like in my early 20s, and somebody sort of like, all they had to do was say like fairies are real. And then I was just like, and then it all kind of sort of like flooded in. I was like, oh, yeah, that okay. Like now that thing that happened kind of makes more sense.
It's really interesting how like the mind works. And what I find really interesting about what you just told me is that like you telling me that you're on this boat with your friend and he says this thing, and that's where your mind immediately goes to, potentially to a memory you had not actively accessed in an extremely long time. And there is this like type of hyper speed associative power that our brains contain. Like we can process and associate new information, old information, memory, a song, a color, a smell, the way something felt. Like we can do all of that in a fraction of a half second from one trigger. And so I'm really with you when you're like telling that part about your friend just casually saying this, and then like what must have subsequently been the immediate memory trigger followed by like a weird almost knowingness. I like recently, as I've been trying to unpack what the expletive, I'm going to try to swear less, by the way, on this show, what the expletive is going on in my house. Sometimes I'm just relying on that like pure associative, like instantaneous, like, oh, this is what that is. Okay. That like, So I really appreciate your bravery in like the internal dialogue way that memory became almost like a confirmation in that moment. That's very powerful. And going back to episode number 2 with Monique, what I said to her then, and I'll say to you now, and then I'll ask my question, is it's remarkable how the brain cannot like let go of its emotional reaction to experiences that are real. Like if you have a real experience and it makes an emotional impact on you, that is effectively with you forever. And it never stops building. Like you get these emotional imprints as a child, and then all throughout adulthood they continue. I mean, I'll be honest, I still think about some lady that just cut me off maybe like 2.5 years ago. I think about her every goddamn week she comes up. You know what I mean? Because it bothered me so much the way that it happened. It's just so funny. So my question with that, thanks for letting me say that stuff there. My question would be like, do you remember at all when you were 5 or thinking back on it as we're talking now, any type of emotional reaction to the sparkle, if that's possible? And it's okay if you can't remember.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It mostly, I like, from what I feel is the situation, it just seemed like I was I think it was something that it was just like I couldn't process it because it was just something. So I don't know if I had, I'm trying to think if there was any kind of emotion there or just a feeling of like, okay, maybe the thought that like, well, a sparkle doesn't seem bad or negative or anything. And I was sort of like, I woke up and it was just so beautiful in the bedroom. And so I just, if anything, I just felt probably calm, like peace, because I just went back to sleep like it was nothing really. So
Thanks for digging in there. And I mean, you're quite young when this memory is being formed. So uh, one question I also had, if you could maybe remember this, about how big was this sparkle, like in terms of overall size? That would be a question I was hoping that you could remember.
I would say it was. I would say maybe probably the main sparkle part or the main like core of it would be like an inch or two, and then the surrounding light kind of from it or the sparkly light from it would be like another like 5 inches, six, maybe something like that in diameter around it. If that makes sense. Like sort of like.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And I don't know if for the audience listening, Leaf is kind of new to Fascinating Fae as a listener. Also, just real quick, I want to say something in appreciation of you. I both received like a really great email from Leaf as well as an Instagram friend request. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate getting that feedback from people and like, getting the conversation continuing and going and stuff. It means a lot to me. And so thank you for that very much.
Oh yeah, no problem.
What I was going to say was like when I talk with Monique and talk about my own fairy, my fairy was like the way that it's about, first of all, it was approximately the same size, what you and I saw.
Okay.
And other people have also seen them in that rather, sort of apple-sized range, softball-sized range.
Okay.
Seems to be a fairly common size. Vicky mentioned that like gnomes in particular, like stay small when you're small. And then as you get older, they appear bigger to you. But when you're young, they kind of keep themselves small so that they don't freak you out too bad. So Fae can potentially not only shapeshift, but they can also, potentially change size.
Yeah.
Also, like while I'm telling you this, something has just come to mind that I might as well just say because it just popped into my head. Kind of like what you just were talking about on the ferry. There's this episode with Lapis called Terrifying Transformational Texas, and in it he does talk for a brief minute about this weird frog that ended up inside a totally closed room, and he found this big frog underneath the bed of this totally closed room, and he could not figure out, and still to this day cannot figure out how it got in there. And then I was talking to Jem, who I believe you're friends with Jem, and she was saying that she has video of a fairy like jumping, turning immediately into a frog, turning from a frog back into a fairy on the next hop, and then turning effectively back into a frog again, and then turning and then the frog jumping in a really inexplicable way where it launches up and flies towards her hedgerow and rock wall. And it just made me think, as soon as you were talking about that, like, oh, hey, maybe that explains why that frog in Lapis's house was there, because it was a fairy a second ago, and then it just immediately changed into a frog. But going back to the sparkle, which is kind of what I was prompted by, and just thinking about like, the size of these things too, kind of as an interesting subtext to because, a frog is around the same size as an apple in some circumstances. I think the way Lapis was describing it and the way Jem was describing it as well. But when I saw my fairy, my fairy was like super illuminated, and sparkle would definitely fit into the adjectives that I would use. I've also said it was like deconstructing around the sides. Like reality looked like it was deconstructing. And there's this, it also was like, this is me drawing from Monique's dialogue. She said it looked like television static rolling in a ball. So we were all like, a lot of people on this show have struggled to describe the way these things sparkle. And you might be the first person to use the word sparkle, but I would argue that I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, because the static, that's really cool. That is really interesting because I wouldn't, yeah, there's something about it that had a maybe just the movement of it is kind of like the staticky television.
When she said it the first time, I got big chills because it was like that to me was when she said, yeah, it was like the color of television static is exactly how she says it.
Okay.
And I thought, what a cool way to put it, the color of television static. And then as I asked her more, she was like, yeah, it was just like, you know how television static is constantly there, but it's constantly not the same thing at the same time. Like a river, you know, when next time you go look at a river, just look at that river for a second and realize the river is always there, but it's never the same water. And then, you know, so it's kind of like that, right? Like it's constantly there, but it's constantly changing. And so, yeah, the television static moving kind of at the fringes of, it's so hard to really describe. I'm glad we're talking about the way it was sparkling a little bit more. Was it moving at all, or was it kind of stationary as you could recall?
Yeah, it was definitely just in the one spot. And, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know, I could have been seeing it for 1 second, maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds. It wasn't really doing anything other than just.
My fairy encounter was very fast too. This is cool. I'm glad we can talk about this amount of detail from a memory in your childhood. But what I think goes on is when you do see an astonishing thing, it doesn't really matter how old you are. It can leave a lasting imprint. It feels to me too, Leaf, like I'm just picking up like an intuition, I guess, more than anything. Maybe I'm just talking out loud. Who knows? Really, I mean, I who am I? But it feels like it was just like watching over you in a happy way is kind of the vibe I'm picking up.
I definitely didn't have any, you know, negative feelings about it or anything. So, you know, part of me is just like, oh, I should do some sort of hypnotherapy or something, or hypnosis. I don't know if that's what it's called, but to find out, you know, I wonder what happened before or after, or, you know, this type of thing. But
that's meaningful because if it's enough of a memory impact that you want to know that in and of itself says something. And I'm with you. I want to go through I think it's called a hypnotic regression. I think that's what it's called. Where they, you know, like the kind of thing they did with Travis Dalton from Fire in the Sky, that book, and recounted him getting abducted. He went to like a hypnotherapist, and then that guy. You know what's funny is the audio is totally fine up until just a minute ago when we started talking about you wanting to go for hypnotherapy. I wonder, like, sometimes I wonder to what extent I'm just hearing it and it'll show up on the recording. We'll figure it out. It's still pretty interferency, but I think, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out.
hello. Okay. Yep. Yeah, it's so weird. It seems like it works well, and then it just.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I talked to my dad because he's in the hospital. He just got out of the hospital. No problem. I use the exact same setup. We're just talking about, and I talk to like, I talk to a variety of people on this setup, but when I'm doing Fae stuff, it's so weird. Like, let's just talk about it for a second. We'll make it part of the episode because it's so weird. Can I tell you a little bit about what was going on in the past couple of days? I don't want to spoil an episode for you, but would you like to know? So, like, I recorded this episode with Jem, and in it, she's talking about this gnome, right? And so later, after I talk with somebody, I edit the stuff, and I'm editing her episode, and I'm just getting like hit with this like mental word, like Pink Floyd, Pink Floyd, Pink Floyd. And so I go outside, I have a smoke, and then it kind of comes to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of want to put some of the stuff Jem said to like Time by Pink Floyd. So I do that. I'm really shortening this down because you listen to a full episode about this story, but we might as well talk about it here because it's happening again. And so I do all that, and then like I finish it, and I'm like super happy about the work. And then I'm like, okay, I'm pretty tired. I'm just going to listen to some Pink Floyd for fun now. And I'm at my computer like I am right now, exact same situation. And I have my audio preferences tab, which is I'm on a MacBook. So for everyone listening, you can recreate this. If you have a Mac, you go to System Preferences and then Audio. It opens up your audio preferences. And now you can see which devices your computer has connected to it that are related to audio. For example, you can see one example would be internal MacBook Air speakers. And next to it, it literally says wired in. That's the setting, right? Next to that would be like my GeForce microphone that I'm talking on now, and it would show USB. And then another example might be like my Bluetooth, J5 speaker, and it would show the input as Bluetooth. So to finish the story, so I do Jem's editing, I put it to Pink Floyd. I'm like, that's really cool. I like it. I'm happy with that. I'm proud of it. Whatever. I come to listen to Pink Floyd casually now on my own time, and when I go to switch from my headphones to my MacBook Air speakers, literally, while I'm looking at it, the settings just disappear. Like all of the devices disappear. And specifically, I turn to like the left bottom part of my screen to move my mouse to go there. And the way that it disappeared, what it did is it's like, if you've ever seen like a scene in a movie where, like, I don't know, a hacker takes over a computer, or like a better example would be like a scene in a movie where a spy dude is replacing the CCTV footage with his own loop. And there's that 1/2 second that kind of glitches, and then it comes back. It was like that. Like I went to look at it, and then in front of my eyes, it was like glitched. And then when it came back, all the settings were gone and the color of the widget had changed. And I was like, this is so messed up. I couldn't physically change from my headphones to my MacBook speakers. So I got up and I was like, that's so weird. I took screenshots of it because it was so weird. And then I was like, asked my phone to play the same song. And then my phone started to play a different song in a halting way, stopped for 7 minutes or so, and then out of nowhere played a song called The Gnome by Pink Floyd. and then stopped after playing that. And then that in and of itself was messed up. And then I went to go talk about that in an episode, which is what I'm referring to right now. And while I'm making that episode, even more weird stuff started to happen. Like I tried to record that song so I could play it for everybody and say, this is what played. And I did record that song. I'm looking at it, recording it. It's just like, actually, Leaf, what happened at the start of this call with you and I, where I'm looking at it. I'm looking at you talking. I can see your waveform laying down. So to go back to what I'm saying, I watched the waveform lay down for the Gnome song. I hit pause on YouTube so that it didn't, go to another song and make an editing job for me. I go back to Audacity, I hit stop, and I can see a 2-minute and 15-second waveform. You know, you can see the song start, the middle part, and the song end. I know I have recorded the song. I save it. I talk about the song, and then I go to move the song from where I have it saved at the front of the track cycle to the end. I do that. I go to play it back and listen to it. And out of nowhere, that song is cut short at 25 seconds, which is the gnome's name. And also, weird, episode 25, too, on top of it. So, I know. And then, so now when you and I start talking, right, as soon as you start telling, like, okay, where should I start my memory? And so I think what's going on there, this is what I think. I think what's going on there is you're saying, where should I start my memory? And then you're like really going into like your brain and accessing that memory. And as you do that, your vocal waveform immediately cuts off in front of my eyes, which we have on record for the audio now of that happening. So let me ask you a question. What do you make of all that? Like, what do you think? And by the way, there's no technical problems now. We're fine again. So what do you think is going on? Do you think the Fae can actually interfere with tech? I'm curious what your perspective is.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, yeah, it's tricky because it's easy to go back and forth with it, right? Because on one hand, you can be like, well, could be this, could be that, maybe, the plug was like this, or, who knows, whatever. But then in some cases, it's like, this is not explainable. Like, I mean, we have our own weird little tech issue in this house where I am now, that happens to my partner all the time. And like, he tells me about it all the time. And like, I sort of laugh about it a little bit, but he insists that there's just no way or there's no reason for this thing to be happening. And he like cannot explain it. And he's like, he's kind of a techie person as well, and just sort of like aware of all those things. And he just can't figure it out. Basically like I don't know what it's called. When you have when you play guitar, but you have one of those boards that are on the ground and you can like push all the little buttons and stuff. Yeah, I guess it's a pedal board. I think it has pedals on it, and then it has like a bunch of other settings, and it's a good sized pedal board. Um, yeah, that one. Ever since we moved into this place, like he'll go like to the basement to play, and it'll be working perfectly fine, and then it does some sort of silly thing. Like he actually has videos of it where it just starts like randomizing and like going through all the like the numbers of all the things that you can choose and stuff like that. All the numbers just go crazy, and he can't play guitar. And yeah, we've joked about having a gnome or some kind of fae of some kind here, like who likes to bug us sometimes, because there's just again, I don't know though. I don't know those. I don't know anything about these pedal boards, but he, insists that like he can't figure it out. He like Googled it and like tried to find some sort of explanation, but yeah. So I think I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, I suspend my disbelief. I'm like, yep, okay. There's a gnome here.
I'm like that too. Like when it initially was messing up at my laptop level, and then I just got up and I was like, okay, well that's like no one's gonna believe me, but And then when I asked for the song that I wanted to hear, which was Obscured by Clouds, and instead the weird sequence of events where it played echoes in a halting way and then played the gnome. By the way, I mean just for you, I didn't know the song The Gnome even existed.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Neither did I. And when I first heard it, it was kind of coming out of my bathroom from my phone, unexpectedly, because like I had fully stopped talking to my phone, and I was standing in the kitchen eating oranges in silence, and then it started to play, And I was like crooking my ear, and I was like, what the shit is that? Is that a song about a gnome? Which was weird, right? And then I was like really tired at that point. So I went to bed, didn't think much of it, but I got up in the morning and I couldn't shake it. And then when I did hear the song lyrics for the first time was when I was recording it for, to share it with everybody, to like stealing it from the internet to share it with everybody for my podcast. And it says in it says this, it's like, it talks about the gnome. It's like, let me tell you a story about a little man, if I can. His name is a gnome named Grimble Grumble. And then it's like little gnomes stay in their homes, eating, laughing, drinking their wine. And then it says the weirdest thing, which is worthy of bringing up now. It basically says, they live in their homes biding their time. And then the conclusion of the song is, and this has been in my head all day, so I'm glad I'm getting to talk about it and share this earworm with everybody. The song then goes, and then one day, hooray, a brand new way for gnomes to say, ooh, ah. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, they live in their house, they bide their time, and then all of a sudden, one day, there's a brand new way for gnomes to say ooh ah. And I just think to myself about the degree to which my computer is getting messed with. Like your man's pedal board, like, I know my machine, right? I know what it should do and not. Like, men are kind of like that with their equipment. They're like, they want to know their machines. They give their stuff girl names a lot of the time, like they name their car or whatever and stuff like that. So, you are perplexed when something is not working right, and you feel like weird because you're like, no, this should not be right. And I do wish I had recorded it like live as a video capture of my screen, which I'm going to commit to starting to do when I start to work on Fascinating Fae episode stuff from now on. Because I need everyone to understand how crazy it was to see the color of the widget change and to see, because the thing is, like, if I unplug my mic, okay, then I will watch that mic disappear from the selectable items in that submenu. If I plug the mic back in, I can see the microphone appear as the selectable items in that submenu. That's how that works, okay? But I can't physically unplug the MacBook Air speakers. They're built into the laptop. And I can't physically unplug the MacBook Air microphone. It's wired in behind the screen to, that little hole next to the camera. And so it's not possible to remove those things from that submenu. It's just not. Like, even on a total failure of everything else, like, they're wired in, so they're gonna always appear in the menu. They might, like, you could break it, like you could pour water on the mic and glitch it out. The computer's still gonna recognize that it's wired in there. It's just so strange to me. So, and then of course, to finish, I didn't do anything. I left the computer open because I was like, I wonder what will happen if I just leave the computer open. And I came back and it had resolved partially. The inputs were now visible, but the color of the widget hadn't changed. And then when I finally rebooted the computer, color of the widget came back. All the inputs are there normal. But again, inexplicable degree of weirdness. Because again, I'm just going to go back to the start of you and I talking. I was looking at your waveform while you were talking, because you had just started to talk post me intro, and it just cut out while you were talking. I could still hear you, but I can't see, like, the way the recording software is still recording. The clock is still ticking away, but it is as though the software, for whatever reason, can no longer hear the microphone.
Weird.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, obviously fairies.
Now, with that beautiful segue, and thanks for indulging me in what I feel is probably me talking a little bit too much in your episode. Sorry for that.
All good.
And I will say the audio problem has come back again, which is funny. But we're going to leave it in there because I think it's part of the experience at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
What I'm going to ask next, if I could be so, bold, and if you could be so kind, tell me about fairy as a religious practice. I think I'm probably not giving that the right title. So could you correct me first of all, and then take the audience into some understanding around that, please?
Sure. So around 2020, like a lot of people probably got the vibes to go inward because of everything that happened with the pandemic. And obviously not everybody felt this way, but I think a large number of people seem to feel like, okay, this is maybe a time to just slow down and kind of go inward and this type of thing. I was, yeah, it took me a little bit. I didn't immediately, just open up to spiritualities or anything like that. I had been somewhat spiritual as a teenager, researching certain things like Buddhism and things like this. And then in my 20s and most of my 30s, I was more just trying to survive, undiagnosed autistic, trying to, just get through life and have a job and focus on the reality of the material world, just trying to live. So I think I just didn't really, it's not that I wasn't spiritual or that I wasn't open to things. I just wasn't sort of able to do that. I had to focus on my life, and live. But yeah, when that happened, 2020, I was also in a good place. You know, like not worrying about money or anything like that at the time or this type of thing. So sort of comfortable, and I had this opportunity to sort of open up to. Well, I actually went to therapy, which was really good, and I realized the possible ADHD things happening and some of the other things that were sort of holding me back and autism and these other sort of elements of my life that I just had really um, not been open to. And so the therapy really helped. Um, and then I was opening up to sort of spiritualities, which I think were sort of laying there dormant. They were just sort of sitting there, there's all these ideas and fun, beautiful things to explore. And I wasn't doing any of that. And so initially, my first, stepping stepping into some kind of spirituality was through trying to understand witchcraft and what's witchcraft and what's going on with witchcraft and who are witches? Is this a real thing or what's going on? And then that segued into thelema. I don't know if you know anything about thelema, but it's the Aleister Crowley. It's ceremonial magic and um, it's sort of supposed to be which some kind of witchcraft is low magic and you know ceremonial magic is high magic, and so it kind of gets this this one's not as good, and this one's if you're really smart and cool, you do the high magic sort of thing. And I just wasn't vibing with that overall as well. This is a very generalized take on all of this. So anyway, so 2020 and for over the last couple of years going on from 2021, 2022, I was exploring all this magic stuff. And I was making artwork about fairies, but I think I just still wasn't really I don't know, ready to explore, let's say fairy witchcraft or fairy magic or this type of thing, which, are is a thing that exists that people there's communities of people who are doing this sort of thing. Um, so I would say 2023 was probably when I first like really let go and let myself fully explore like fairy witchcraft. And I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but it was just, it was reading certain books. Like there's a lot of people currently who are really interested and involved in that community. So there's a bunch of books written about it. It's sort of like connected to like paganism and this type of thing and nature. And like it really made sense to me because I was, basically since 2020, I was, kind of just looking within and like also like sometimes just looking at nature because there wasn't a lot, to do, right? And you're just sort of like, okay, I'm gonna go like try and start a garden, and I'm gonna just like sit out there and look at my plants growing and like, look at some insects and just like exist. Um, so I really like connected to nature and pagan stuff and this fairy witchcraft stuff. And yeah, so then I started practicing this fairy witchcraft sort of thing 2023. And like where I live right now, I'm really lucky because I'm surrounded by nature. So yeah, it's been a really interesting exploration. Do you just want to know more about about it or?
Yeah, I would like to know more. Thank you very much for that sort of sharing about yourself, first of all. I appreciate when people are able to be honest about things like therapy. I've had some traumatic stuff in my life, and I can second the sort of sentiment you're putting out there, Leaf, that therapy is useful. It can be intimidating to get involved in it, but like when you start getting the help you need around traumas or just other stuff, your world does open up. And like I think that's a really beautiful way to put it as well, like how you just were like, oh, there's all these beautiful things like spirituality just like sitting there to be explored. And I very much myself have gone through a similar, transition from like just surviving to like all of a sudden realizing like, oh, I have like the freedom, the privilege and the space to mentally grow, to spiritually grow, etc. And I just really like hearing like another person talk about that in that way. I really appreciate and respect everyone's struggle and journey in this world. And like good for you for going there with both the therapy and then like afterwards deciding to like explore interesting stuff. I like that about you. That's cool. And thanks for letting everybody listening get that insight into your personhood. One of the better things about the show, outside of just like hearing about fairy encounters, is the fact that I think that the show allows everyone listening to recognize the value in each other. All these different voices and perspectives are so individual, but a lot of themes are pretty intact, and curiosity is definitely one of them. So yeah, one of the things that I wanted to know, and I think maybe many people listening might also want to know this, how does one learn about fairy witchcraft specifically? Like, can you just, you don't have to give any links or anything, but where and how did that journey start working for you? Like, where did you find stuff?
Let's see. There's like a surprising number of people writing kind of about it right now. And I don't know if like it's probably just not something that people you still have to dig around to find it, I guess. If you have the interest, it's there, it's available. Um, but yeah, it was just I mean, I can't remember titles or anything right now, but there are just some books that I found, which I could probably just send you a list afterwards and you can like put it in the notes and things like that. But there was just books like about fairy familiars and fairy witchcraft that have come out recently. And I think, yeah, I guess it's just, I mean, it's interesting because there's some people who will say that like um, the fairy magic or fairy faith is the fairies like form of witchcraft, and then some people will say that no, there's fairy witchcraft, which is something you can do, like as like a person who is interacting with fae sort of thing. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Like it is a really big world of things. I mean, there's so many books even just from like the 60s and 70s, and a lot of books too are just all about the encounters, and you can read about those. I feel bad because I don't have like titles like off the top of my head.
No, don't feel bad. One of the things about Fascinating Fae is this is not a show for experts.
Okay. Okay, good.
I mean, yeah, like I'll let them come on. I mean, like for example, like Claire from the Fairy Whispering podcast. That's my kind of expert, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Joe Hickey Hall, she qualifies too, but I am not those. I am not analogous to those ladies whatsoever. I am not a fairy researcher. I know jack shit about fairies outside of the fact that I saw one. And through the process of making this podcast, I'm getting a hardcore schooling from the Fae all over the map, including moving stuff in my house, like what we just experienced earlier when your recording stopped working, everything I was talking about and more. This persistent owl that keeps showing up at the weirdest times in association with this show. There's lots of weird stuff going on to be discussed. But yeah, this isn't a show for experts. And so like, for the audience listening, go use your Reddit Kung Fu. You can find this stuff if Leaf was able to find it.
Yeah, and I can send a list too.
We'll do that too. I mean, this is a semi-professional podcast endeavor, everybody. Probably the biggest pet peeve my audience would have is my lack of updating of the website. So once again, let's get those show notes over here, and I'll make another semi-empty promise that I'll sometime soon update the website. But listen, when I do finally do it, it will be done to a nice level, and all this content that we refer to in these episodes will be up there. Yeah, I want to say something about like Fae magic that might be a little out of left field, but this is my take on the topic. And I'm glad to be talking with you about it because I just recently I'm talking in the past like 4 to 6 weeks, decided I wanted to know a little bit more about this too, based on something Lapis said, because he was also talking about ritual magic. Also, G from A Hint of Hellfire episode 15, he talks about ritual magic. So, now, just to go back a second, like if you had asked me about fairies 5 years ago, I would have said, I think it's for Dungeons and Dragons nerds. Like it's literally, I would have cast a lot of shade on it. I just didn't register for me. So that's how new I am to this whole topic matter. But I'm equally new to like magic, and I would say that like I probably would have thrown magic even a rung lower under fairies in my idea of stuff that was real. But subsequent to this show process and subsequent to my own encounter, I've had a new perspective. And so what I wanted to say about magic and fairy magic in particular is the Fae to me, like even what you were talking about earlier at the foot of your bed being sparkly and strange, I think they're kind of like an interdimensional entity. That's my perspective. And so magic and fairy tales and all the stuff that I have been dismissive of, and I'm going to be frank, am still kind of dismissive of because it's still not contemporary enough for me. But I'm starting to look at it differently and think to myself, are some of these fairy tale like playbook rules that are laid out in the fairy tales, and is some of this Fae, like there's like the Fae trad and a couple of other Fae magic stuff, things that I've seen recently. is this a technical owner's manual to life with interdimensional beings? Am I looking at this the wrong way? Like, is this actually tomes of knowledge, and does it work? And so my question, I guess, is like, with that said, I think that maybe they're like handbooks, like literally like how to program your VCR. Did you have any success? Was there any, I shouldn't even say success because I don't even know if like it's a matter of like conjuring spells or anything, but did learning about Fey magic and introducing any of the practices into your life produce any noticeable changes or results in your world? I guess is my general question.
That's a good question. And as I'm just, I don't really do the practices anymore. As I said, I was focusing on Buddhism and things like that. But I will say that that um, that experience and those explorations were like a gateway to many different things, to opening up, doors, opening up my mind, to little experiences that would be really experience really what's the word, significant to me, um which might not be anything to the average person. Like, we moved into this house that we're in now. I'm surrounded by nature. When we first moved in here, they had to fix a pipe in the yard. So we had this nice yard with just grass or whatever. They dug it up and they left like a little mound of like dirt. And because my partner and I are both like ADHD, we never got around to, fixing the dirt mound. We just left it there in the front yard. And then we moved here in the fall, and come spring, an entire yarrow like meadow grew out of this mound of dirt. And that was not there before or anything like that. I have no idea where the yarrow was. I guess it was unearthed. And like, it's one of those things where anyone can sort of write those things off. But because I was sort of practicing this nature pagan fairy magic, like, this was like a beautiful sign to me that I was kind of on the right path, and that here I am now, like, with this abundant yarrow, and it's beautiful. No other lawns around here have anything like that, and it's just something I can actually use in my like herb magical practices and things like that. And just many little things like that. So yeah, just opened up my mind, and definitely brought me more in tune with nature, in tune with myself, and ultimately led me to Buddhism, actually. So yeah, I just think if you really go all in and let yourself, like, my biggest thing too, because like I said before, I was, before 2020, again, it wasn't that I was closed off to this stuff, but I did kind of have a bit of more of a science-y view of things. Like, I think, there's science and everything, but it's just, that's kind of how my brain worked. I was like, well, I can't see it, so it doesn't, I don't know if that's real. But I then, with this like suspending of your disbelief, and just like going and letting yourself sort of explore these things without that judgment on yourself. Like, that's essentially what I had to do, was like, okay, I'm not going to just sit here, judging myself, thinking like, okay, maybe it is kind of silly, but like, why not? Like, why not explore these like magical worlds, like, if we can, right?
Yeah, I really like your communication style. Talking with you is really uplifting.
Oh, okay, good.
No, fully. Like, you're really like self-assured in the most beautiful way about like what's right. And it's refreshing to hear somebody talk about themselves and their interests that way. It's very permissive for others. It's like you're setting a great example. Truly, I truly mean that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, like my internal dialogue is nowhere near as good as yours. You're on a good point. You're on a good track there. And thanks for showcasing that so openly. You know, let's talk about Buddhism for a quick second. And then what we'll do is we move towards the end of this conversation out of respect for your time. And thank you for letting me reinitiate this call 4 times to reestablish clean audio. We're fine again here now that we've moved away from more like hardcore Fae talk to more general talk, which again is the pattern. It's only when I'm really talking about certain Fae stuff with people that it does that. Go figure. I've taken it to mean that the Fae are listening, and that I don't even take it to mean that they don't want the information out. I think it's more like the confirmation that they're listening.
Yeah. That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah, and you know what? Buddhism is a great segue to why that's how I think that way. And so just introducing the concept of Buddhism briefly here on the Fascinating Fae podcast, which is a new one for everyone. For those not familiar with it, I mean, how would you describe Buddhism in your own words, if you could, please?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. There's a few, core things that just make so much more sense to everything. And when you put, I don't know, like, yeah, it's basically like, I mean, for me anyway, I had a moment recently because of everything that's going on with Palestine, and then learning about Congo, and then learning about Sudan, and then everything sort of flooding in. And I was like, I think you are as well, like a very empathetic person who, is just when you're an empathetic person and you're like, everything is coming to the forefront, and you're like, okay, this is not good. I always knew the world needed to change. I always knew we needed a better world. And here we are now finally seeing direct evidence of why. And most of the evidence was always sort of like hidden, and you're kind of like, well, I think things are okay. You never really can tell, right? It's like when people take your garbage and you go somewhere, and you're like, well, I think the garbage is fine wherever it goes. I hope, like we sort of live in that blind space, right? And I think like what I wasn't finding with all of these other types of sort of spiritual experiences, even though they were like definitely gateway to where I am now, is just that when you realize how much your ego and how much you're attached to everything, like to anything from when somebody says something to you, and it sits with you, and you're like so attached to that, and like they say, maybe they say something rude, or maybe you said something that was like awkward or something, and then you're just sitting there, and you're like, just the way that we attach ourselves to all of our little stories, and how our ego gets like implanted into like everything we're doing. Like, I can't, before I started exploring Buddhism, I had this idea that maybe one day I'd like to write a book or something. And then after I kind of had this like, ego death, or whatever you want to call it, like an ego awareness, I realized, I was like, well, why do I want to write a book? Like, and then I could see my ego like attached so deeply to this sense of like why I wanted to write this book, why I wanted to do this thing. And again, not a bad thing. Like, this is just human nature. But when I found Buddhism, it all started to like make sense, because I was like, oh, okay, I see now. Like, we attach ourselves to things, and like, yeah, just practicing non-attachment, practicing like the awareness of your ego, practicing presence, like through meditation and things like this. And yeah, for me, like, it just kind of all came together, and it kind of
that hits that really hits a lot of the points, honestly. Veganism, Buddhism for me, I kind of am newer to it, but I would say I'm a Buddhist as well, and my reasons are very personal. I was nearly killed 2 years ago in a violent assault, and I lost like literally everything I thought was myself. My whole identity, my giant boat, my relationship, my career, my mobility, everything. And I've been struggling for purpose since then. This podcast, totally, when you're talking about ego, I can feel myself like attaching to this podcast with ego. Especially in the recent weeks when I feel like the audience for this show is like literally blowing up. I come into Spotify every day and there's for example, it took me the first 3 months, it took me to get 1,000 plays. And I'm on track of like 500 plays a week right now. And so like, that's insane to me. And I'm getting lots of emails from people like you and other stuff. So as you're talking about ego, I can feel my not yet fully evolved Buddhist self really still present in ego in a lot of ways, still trying to get back to everything I felt like I lost. I know that's present when I work out every day trying to recover, and I'm trying to heal that event, but I'm like really still super pissed off at everything I lost. And through my attempts to recover, it's been very helpful for me to discover Buddhism. Also, I'm a vegan, and I've been a vegan a long time, and I'm not judgmental, so this isn't a vegan PSA or anything, but Buddhism is a vegan religion. Buddha was vegan at the end. And what I like about Buddhism as a story is that it's just a story. It's really like, if you think about other religions, they're kind of dogmatic, and they kind of say, this is who God is, or this is who Creator is, and this is the rules. Whereas Buddhism, by contrast, is saying, there's this guy, we know him today as Buddha. Once he was known as Siddhartha, a young prince, and they just tell you the story of this young prince who used to have everything that he wanted: money, women, sex, food, entertainment, luxury, and he found himself unsatisfied with all of that, and eventually became a fat, happy vegan who just realized that you should hang out and observe things and not be so attached, exactly like you're saying. And the whole concept of Buddhism that appeals to me is it's just a bunch of people trying to unpack this really happy fat, because when you think about Buddha lawn ornaments in your mind, you can think about the Buddha who's Siddhartha. That's the Buddha with beads around his head, sitting with his legs crossed. That Buddha was trying to meditate like an egomaniac. He was trying to meditate himself into perfection. And then he eventually realized that was stupid too, and became the fat, happy Buddha that we all know and love, who's got the big pot belly. If you think about that lawn ornament, he's bald, he's got a pot belly, and he's laughing and he's happy. And so I think for me, like, Buddhism and this concept of like the Fae being real go hand in hand, because you're just observing reality as a Buddhist. And if that includes the presence of the Fae, so be it. Before I let you go with the question I like to ask, right towards the end, and I will ask you this question here in a second, I wanted to share a thought with you that I'm not sure I'm sure you've got some knowledge of this stuff, but you might not know this particular thing. And I think, with your permission, I'm going to add a little audio clip at the beginning of your episode. I'm kind of drafting this episode in my mind as we're laying it down. But here's what I want to say. Leaves, like leaves on trees, your namesake leaf, they have a quantum capability. There's actually this whole episode of this program I watch called Spark, called The Quantum Leaf. And so when sunlight hits a leaf, the thing that's happening, and I'm going to probably mansplain this terribly, so forgive me, but I'm going to do my best. Again, not a show for experts over here. But when sunlight hits a leaf, there's all these photoreceptors in the leaf that perform the function of photosynthesis, where they convert the sunlight and the water and the sugars, where they convert the sunlight, water, and carbon molecules into sugar, basically. So maple syrup is a direct byproduct of a leaf photosynthesizing the sun and creating those sugars for you. It powers life. It's how all plants grow, basically. But when the sun hits the leaf, light is both a particle and a wave. It has the duality of light to it. The famous, mind-bending thing, like how is something both a particle and a wave? So when it hits the leaf, the particle portion of the light is kind of what is being absorbed and turned into the sugar, or converted into the sugar. And an individual particle of light hitting the leaf is this is what's trippy about it. So if you can think about like an individual particle of light as like a grain of sand, and then you think about a leaf as like a tic-tac-toe board, for example, okay? When the light is getting to the moment from the light has traveled from the sun and it's just about to get to the leaf, in both theory and in practice, that single molecule of light, if you would, the single photon, is simultaneously every single place in the leaf at once, and also only in one available photoreceptor. So the leaf has like thousands and thousands and millions of photoreceptors in it. Every single leaf does. And all of the light hitting it is simultaneously in every one of those photoreceptors, and only in the one that's actually processing it at the same time. And so the point, I guess, and the episode from Spark that I'll put at the beginning of this will do a way better job of explaining it, is that the leaf is truly capable of immediately simultaneously existing as a holder of light at it's just so weird. And so I just think that's a really powerful namesake for you. You're so self-possessed and able to talk about this spiritual growth stuff in relation to this fairy topic in a beautiful way, and I really do appreciate it. Well, Leaf, as we move to finish up, the last question I have for you is a pretty simple one, but it's a devious one in the sense that it can open up a lot of thoughts or maybe very few. It really doesn't have one particular way of getting answered. And I should also say there is no wrong answer or right answer here, because nobody really knows, myself included. But my question is, what do you think that fairies are?
This is a good question. I personally think that they're essentially beings that are in the same they're just okay. They're where we are. They're on Earth, but they are in a different plane. Something along those lines. So I just kind of consider them to be here, like next to us, ultimately. But yeah, in order to connect with them, it's a whole thing where it's either really random, or there's possibly some ways to do this through, fairy magic and this type of thing. But yeah, I consider them to be just it maybe possibly just like a different dimension, a different plane. I wouldn't necessarily say astral, like I wouldn't say they're like probably in the astral or anything like that, because I feel astral is more it's a whole different thing, which I don't have the words for exactly, but yeah, so I guess that's kind of how I imagine them to be. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard to hear you. I hope you can hear me, but
I can hear you just fine, and I truly cannot, for the life of me, think of what is accounting for this problem again, as it has worked intermittently just fine throughout the rest of this call. But I'm just going to trust that I'm only hearing it in my ear mostly, and that I'll be able to separate the two parts of this conversation in post. Boy, is it ever hard to hear this back in my ear, though, as I'm talking today. Sorry for the audience listening if I don't sound like my normal self. And some audio has just started to play. What's playing? It's Alex's episode playing for some reason in my ear. Hold on. Well, that's so strange. Yeah. Hi.
hey, hey.
See, it's not my microphone.
Oh, okay.
Like nothing's changed, right? So now it's fine. I know, and I use this particular program for calls all the time, and it never does that ever. Now, I'm sure that I will be able to like isolate the two audio signals sufficiently, so we're good. So what I was gonna say was, that's a beautiful answer. What you said there that actually really clicks with me is like they're earthbound. This is something that I've been wrestling with. Like, where are they in relation to us? And I agree with you. I think that they're here, like you're saying. I think that that's correct. I don't sense that they're like from space or like coming in from like I think that Earth is like a multi-dimensional ecosphere with like yet to be taxonomically described interdimensional beings living in it. That's what I think. And like, how can the Fae mess with the computer? How can the Fae mess with the internet? How can they mess with cell signal? How can they mess with, how can a fairy come through the window of my boat? How can a fairy knock stuff over in my house? At the end of the day, it occurs to me that even the computer, it just comes out of the ground. I mean, everything around us just is a product of the earth, right? It was either grown from the earth and modulated, or dug out of the earth and pounded and melted and turned it like, but even the computer is just a bunch of ground when you really stop and think about it. And the Fae come from the earth, as it were. So perhaps this is as simple as it needs to be to understand how the hell they can mess with technology and other things. I mean, if it's of this earth, it's their plane just as much as it's ours. We, it seems like, have to literally, as I just described, dig up, melt, hammer, pound, modulate things in order to get what we want out of it. The stuff out of the earth, we have to like, you know, mold with our hands, if you would. The Fae seem to be like, oh yeah, stuff from the earth. That's like, we are of that, and we can just, with a flick of our wrist, with a flick of our intent, modulate that stuff, because it is us. We are of it. I don't know if I'm making sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had never thought of that.
I'm just trying to struggle with how the hell this gnome is messing with my computer. And like, so, you know, I just tried to take it back to basics. And I was like, right, at the end of the day, the screen on my computer is just sand from the beach. The transistors are just copper and other elements from the ground, right? So that's why I think they can do it. As I move to leave, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping here, Leaf, for the audience listening and for yourself. Thanks for your patience as I do that. And then I'm going to give you the last word, really anything that you feel like you might want to say. But before I do that, I do want to just take a brief moment again and thank you for being here. Thanks for suffering through these unprecedented, you know, I think we had to start this call now 5 times or 6 times. So thank you for that patience and that determination to bring your insights forward. And I know you started off a little hesitant about like, do I have enough to talk about? But truly, this has been a wonderful conversation, you know, a full conversation at that too. So thank you for all of that. I sincerely, really do appreciate it, you know, personally. And also, you know, on behalf of all of the human and non-human listeners that are tuned into Fascinating Fae tonight, super big thanks to Leaf for this gracious journey, you know, through storytelling, through an exploration of all these elements of your personal, you know, experience of Fae and what Fae means to you. And so my housekeeping is as follows. If you've had an encounter, if you'd like to join this conversation and be on the show, drop me an email at encounters@fascinatingfae. Also, there's lots of cool conversations going on the socials, which you can find pretty much everywhere at Fascinating Fae. Be that your Instagram, your Facebooks. You know, we got to keep Mark Zuckerberg. He's got to have some cookies in the pantry too, so go use those services. Keep those big mega corporations afloat. Jokes aside, that's where you can find me. And I guess really just other than that, you know, I do want to say to everyone listening as well, this episode, not sure how it's going to end up sounding, but thanks for your patience if there's some weird parts in it. And let's just recognize it for what it is. It's the Fae chiming in. So Leaf, thanks for being here tonight again. I mean, I really sincerely appreciate it. I know I've said that like 5 times, but I mean it. And I guess what I'd just like to ask to do now is sort of give you the last word. Any thoughts that you want to share with the audience and myself as you leave here tonight?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Yeah, it's good. I feel very comfortable chatting with you. So, am I allowed to promote something, or is that?
Oh yeah, please do. If you got anything to promote, that's totally fine. Yeah, especially after being so gracious with your time with us all. So you've earned the right.
Well, I have an Instagram, and it's Moth and Mythos. I'll send the writing so everyone knows what I'm saying. And on there right now, I'm actually sharing a lot of GoFundMes for the families in Gaza right now. And there is one family in particular that I'm trying to help, and their GoFundMe is in my link tree. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there and let people know that if you don't know, if you're feeling like you want to reach out or help anybody with what's going on right now, that's a GoFundMe. It's a family I speak with every single day. And yeah, if you want to know anything about it, just send me a message. And yeah.
telling me what happened to the honeybees? And tell me why the money tree is the only one preserved. The government's hypocrisy, it lies within democracy. And we should not be shocked to see the things we can't observe. Well, I say we are living in a modern time, in the age of the machines. Well, I think we forget sometimes what we did as human beings. We made Stonehenge, Chichen Itza, made the pyramids at Giza, Mona Lisa, and the great, great China Wall. We learned to farm and build the wheel. We make cities, we make steel. We build boats and then we sail into the squall. Lord, won't you be telling me what happened to the honeybees? And tell me why the money tree is the only one preserved. The government's hypocrisy, it lies within democracy. And we should not be shocked to see the things we can't observe.
The masses pay for all their classes. No more will a brain cost an arm and a leg. If we foot a couple bills and lend a helping hand, no more will a decent man ever have to beg. We post billions in bailouts. We're boosting the bank accounts of brothers who only drive a Benz to the barber. I say let them go bankrupt. We're built from the ground up. It's the only way to prove whose crew is harder. The women are the most oppressed. They deserve more power, not a flower print dress. No bulletproof vest or armored truck can save a soldier from the devil's everlasting touch. When we pass that Dutch and pop a couple bottles, we celebrating our luck of being Canucks. Don't be mucking around in other people's affairs. Dear Mr. Harper, bring the troops back here.
Lord, won't you be telling me what happened to the honeybees? And tell me why the money tree is the only one preserved. The government's hypocrisy, it lies within democracy. And we should not be shocked to see the things we can't observe. Lord, won't you be telling me?